I believe 4:30 has gotten here. Can you hear me back in the back, Ken? Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, welcome to everyone who's here, and thank you, but I also thank the weatherman who let us come here without ice today. I was really a little bit concerned this morning, but I think we all made it safely. Um, and I want also, of course, to thank Jack Gartner, who has agreed to be our first forest speaker of 2026. If, like me, you have been observing what's happened here in order to make it safe for us to be able to walk and drive our cars and do the things we needed to do, then I hope you didn't have any nightmares about what it'd have been like to deal with that situation in 3 airports in New York City, which I think is more than I could even imagine trying to do. But Jack has spent most of his career in airport management, with the last decades in the 3 big airports in New York City. And that's what he's going to be talking to us about tonight, or this afternoon, I should say. He does say he's quite willing to take questions when you have questions. If you will raise your hand when you do, one of us with a mic will try to get it to you so that you can be understood. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, I think. Well, there it is. Okay. Too much information and too big a subject. So let me read this to you to start. Dear Diary, while at Newark Airport recently, sitting at the gate awaiting departure for Chicago, my brother, sister-in-law, and I were sitting near a woman with a pet carrier, from which loud, sort of weird squeaking noises arose every now and then. We couldn't figure out what was in there, a cat, a rodent of some sort. Boarding began, and as we were seated, the woman came down the aisle with the pet carrier. I had to ask her what was in the carrier. A bird, she said. He doesn't like to fly. Well, let me thank Ajay, Amari, and Emma. First of all, thank you, Margaret, for inviting me. What I'm going to try to do today, if there's enough time, is I'm going to take an approach from the general of what is an airport, what do they look like, what's the geography, what's the comparison between many of the airports that all of you have flown in and out of, just to see how different they are. And then we'll get to the specifics of what it's like to be managing several of those, or mostly JFK, which used to be, for any trivia people here, wrong, Major Alexander Anderson Field at Idlewild. And nobody wanted to drop the Idlewild name in 1948 when they named it New York International Airport. So it stayed as Idlewild until we renamed it to Kennedy JFK. So that's one trivia item. You'll probably get a few more today. The other thing I want to say is, while a number of these things that we're going to talk about are very serious in terms of maintaining an airport's safety and keeping it open, for some reason, there seems to be a great deal of humor about things that happen at airports. I mean, it's like somebody turns a switch on when you enter the airport property, And over the years, I have seen some really, really bizarre things. And I have one, if I can find it, I have one from 2 days ago. And this happened in Morocco airport 2 days ago. This, this man got out on the airfield, got on the top of an airplane, and started running back and forth on top of the airplane. And they finally got him down, and he went directly to a mental hospital, which was the case. Why he did this and what he did, but this just happened a couple of days ago. So whatever I'm talking about over all these years still goes on. And that's, I had to share that with you because that's what happens. As a matter of fact, the humor about things at airports that go on, is like golf jokes. I mean, there's so many of them that you come across, and we may see a few as the talk goes on. Anyway, you have the layout map ahead of you, and the only other thing that I could add to this, if any of you saw the Mel Brooks documentary recently, he was asked, well, how is comedy and humor, what causes it? And I really related it to this business of people coming through the airport and doing bizarre things. He said, fear. Fear is what causes comedy. Fear of being caught, fear of doing something embarrassing, fear. And I think maybe that's what happens when people come to the airport. They get afraid of being on the grounds. Anyway, to move on. Um, what is an airport? I will tell you. An airport consists essentially of one or more runways for aircraft, together with associated buildings, hangars or terminals where passengers and air cargo transported by aircraft are processed. But airports are much more than simply places where airplanes can take off and land, or where passengers or freight are handled. The gateways to the modern transportation world. Airports form the terminal ends of air transportation system, and it's the airports that provide system capacity. The capacity of a specific airport depends on its design, weather conditions, operating limits, and air traffic in the airspace system. But more than a component of air traffic, airports are a forum or a marketplace where seemingly disparate activities are brought together to facilitate, for passengers and air cargo alike, the interchange between air and surface transport. So that's the formal. So airports are like a city. I mean, JFK is about the same size as the Battery to 42nd Street in terms of land, but they're small potatoes compared to some of the airports, excuse me, give you some relationships. There are more than 1,700 US airports which are public with at least one runway lit and paved. And by the way, that is a runway light, a sample of a runway light, and it has three brightness meters that the FAA controls depending on the visibility. So 500 have commercial airline service, and 30 airports board 2/3 of all the passengers. The largest airport in the US is Denver, with 33,000 acres. And there are times that they have two weather systems on the same location, um, followed by Dallas, Southwest Florida International, Dulles, Orlando, Kansas City, George Bush, that's Houston, Pittsburgh, Oklahoma City, and Tucson. Dallas has 7 runways. Denver has 6, Detroit 6, and um, um, Kennedy is 5,000 acres. LaGuardia is somewhere between 680 and 800 acres, and the entire airport can fit into the central terminal area at Kennedy. If we wanted to look at size comparison, come on, come on, come on. Okay. So this is the central terminal area here, basically, and on the old layout plan, it's the same area. That entire airport can fit inside, and Newark is in between. They're about 2,000 acres. So one of the things that came up recently is, I have to share with you, this, the stressful, airports. To start off with Newark Airport. Okay, and people are shaking their heads. Yes, and there's airport in Portugal is number 2. Manchester, JFK is 4th. De Gaulle, O'Hare, Los Angeles, Gatwick, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam. That's from worst to a little bit better. And the other interesting comparison is the best U.S. airports, and this is important for you, those of you taking notes, the best airports for drinking alcohol are ranked. Number 1 is Logan. At Nashville, Kansas City, Reagan, Armstrong, Minneapolis, San Diego, Philadelphia. LaGuardia only came in number 9, so that's too bad. And JFK didn't make it at all. So, and finally, in terms of airport comparisons, the busiest airports are, there we go, look, this is a very educated group. This is wonderful. Yes, Atlanta's been number 1 for many, many years. And it used to be Chicago, going back long enough. Dubai is 2nd, Dallas, Tokyo, Heathrow, Denver, Istanbul, O'Hare, and we get down the list. Kennedy, we'll talk about at much more length, had 63 million passengers, and they were like number 14. The growth of aviation has been extraordinary, and there are airports like the New York and New Jersey airports, Salt Lake City. Many of us are going through airports that are brand new, and it is so hard for the airports to catch up and build new terminals and get capacity higher with the existing geography and land mass that they have, and still operate while they're doing this. And all 3 of the airports, Newark, LaGuardia, and Kennedy, are going through that. And again, just a couple of days ago, that piece in the Times about JFK and the building of the terminal, which is over in this area, They're gonna, there used to be 8 terminals here. Many of you remember TWA, National, American, British, International Arrivals, Northwest, Pan American, and Eastern. They're, the, they're going to end up from 8 to 4 terminals, and this terminal on this side of that's the one that's written in that article, is going to be $9.5 billion to build, and it's part of the overall program, which is over $19 billion. So the Port Authority is really playing catch up about this. Okay, so any questions yet? I'll be happy to take questions while I'm talking. As I finish a section, be fine. Let's talk about Kennedy. One of the books on the reading list that I put out, this is a miscellaneous reading list about aviation, about the history of airports, balloons, feather inspection, and it's just a list I've gathered over the years. If anybody is interested, I saw people picking up the titles. But in 1993 and 94, I was tasked to take an author around. His name is James Kaplan, and he's quite well known. And in his early days, he decided to do a book about the airport. So this is the way he described Kennedy. He, by the way, he wrote a lot of profiles about the people at Kennedy, and I would take him to open doors for him to interview them. And he really liked the people working at Kennedy Airport, but he sure didn't like the Port Authority, that's for sure. Kennedy is a city. Some 44,000 people work here. This colossal, reedy, asphalty, garbagey plot by the bay is the size of Manhattan, river to river, 42nd Street to the Battery. The airport has resident homeless population of about 150. There were 9 miles of runway, 22 miles of taxiway, and 7,000 lights. And that is a runway light that I put up there for your edification. God alone knows how many less than legitimate, there are some say ghosts. At least one man is semi-legitimately buried on the runway side. And I was involved in discovering that. So I will share that with you. I am at LaGuardia Airport, and I get a call from my assistant manager. And he says, the general manager got a call from the Daily News. And they are very interested because the wife of a low-level agent some years ago was buried at JFK. I said, excuse me? And my general manager knew nothing. Nobody knew anything except the guys involved. So I had a bunch of duty managers, which were great. But on a weekend, this guy died. His wife brought the ashes to the airport. He arranged for the police to take the bagpipers out to the site. And he was buried. I used to drive past this all the time. Sorry. On the outside of the runway, there's a service road. And I would see this piece of wood sticking up. And I had no idea what it was. And the reason the Daily News called is his wife wanted to join her husband after she passed away. Sorry, we're not going to do that. But that's a true story. Anyway, God alone knows how many less than legitimate others lie here in unmarked plots. Kennedy has an electrical system that could serve a city the size of Hartford, and backup systems that can operate indefinitely in case of a power failure. 70 miles of underground storm drains that empty into Jamaica Bay. There is a subterranean system of pipes that pump aviation fuel directly to airplanes at their hard stands on the ramp. So the fuel comes in on barges. There's a fuel farm down here. There's water over here. And the fuel tanks are all down at this end. And they run the pipes to all the terminals where the equipment picks it up and pumps it into the airplanes. There's an animal shelter with pens that can hold and have held elephants, horses, lions, apes, not to mention cats, dogs, and parakeets. A herd of giant Texan jackrabbits lives out in the reeds among the runways. He got the story, which may or may not be apocryphal, that a crate fell and broke and a couple of rabbits got loose and they multiplied. And he was talking to a cop and he says, "These things are huge. I'm out in my cruiser one night and I see this thing in my headlights. It looked like, what's his name, the giant rabbit in the movie Harvey, like 3 feet tall, including ears." So that was Jim Kaplan's take on Kennedy. So I thought today that I was going to I'm going to give you some more information now, specifically about JFK. Okay? All right. Okay, let's start with the, let me go to this. I thought doing snow as we start is appropriate since what's gone on the last 2 weeks. So I thought I'd start with winter management and ice management and talk about some of the things that we faced. So we have a plan for snow and ice removal that has been developed and evolved over many, many years. And in the year 2000, the large airports got together, and I was part of that group, that decided that the snow and ice conference they were holding every year in Allentown, Pennsylvania, really wasn't dealing with the larger airports. And the people who were coming to the conference were really lower level supervisor, maintenance and operations supervisors. And we really wanted to have a conference where we would get the managers of these operations and above to come to be our keynote speaker and to talk about the problems that larger airports have. Now, the problems are very similar. You know, snow is snow, ice is ice, and when it comes down, you got to do something about it. But we realized that if we didn't get together with the larger and share the kinds of things that we did to respond, because while the functions are all similar from airport to airport, how you handled it was very, very different. For example, just the staff, call in staff, like here. They call staff in and they let staff go, or some staff stayed over. Many airports let their maintenance and operations people sleep over because they were afraid they wouldn't get them back to the airport. So many of us had that kind of a situation, and the union agreements were very different. Some paid while they were sleeping, and some didn't pay while they were sleeping. Some worked 8 hours, some worked 12 on and 12 off. So we discovered that at this conference, that this became the Operations Winter Conference mission and objectives of what we tried to do. Winter operations, removal of snow and ice from paved surfaces at airports, presents one of the major challenges facing airport operators. Delays and closures have an economic impact, both increased costs and customer service goes well beyond airport boundaries. And I'm sure everybody in this room has experienced some kind of cancellation and delays that you would over the years, right? So in 2000, the Large Hub Winter Operations Conference was formed to address and focus on specific operational issues facing the larger airports. It provides a meeting of industry experts, vendors, and airport and airline reps who share information, ideas on the latest materials and technology, and equipment and regulations and procedures for the most efficient, safe, and cost-effective approach. With what we did every year was have case studies from the previous snow year in July. July is the best time to have a snow conference anyway, as we know. So anyway, we would do that, and they would share the information of what they did, and people were very upfront when they made mistakes and things went wrong, because things do go wrong. They came up and we talked about it during the conference. So I just wanted you to get a little feel of what it looks like. And this was submitted by each airport to the conference. These are these big snow blowers that we have. I'll tell you a little bit about the upgrade that we have of these. That's in Alaska. That's a snowy owl, which came as far down as Kennedy and Boston every year. This equipment that you're seeing, big equipment, is something new that resulted from connecting with Finnair, who invited us to Helsinki to see this new technology. And in the old days, we had a broom that rolled the snow when you had a little snow, and then you had a plow, and then you had a blower on the back of your equipment. They put all three of these functions into a single piece of equipment, and we were the first airports to Kennedy, LaGuardia, Boston, Chicago, and Toronto. And where it used to take an hour to clear a runway, if you went out with 2 inches or less on the surface, you could drive up to 50 miles an hour, but 30 was a much better go. And they lined them up staggered, and the runways were about 150 to 200 foot wide, and they would clean a runway in 15 minutes. Toronto did a presentation one year. They had all 4 runways done in 1 hour, and this has become the gold standard on runway and taxiway snow removal. So that's a picture of those. You saw in the beginning the snow blowing, so they would blow it off. Okay. Any questions about snow? No? So if you think they have problems here at the streets and roads, and you take a look at some of these pictures that we have and the discussions that we have, what's happened was the technology really improved, not so much on the snow removal side, but on the communication side. So this is a very big deal because when the snow's coming, every airline has a forecaster. TikTok has 57 forecasters. We had the National Weather Service and we had a contractor weather forecaster. And we get together and we do what you see on television. This model, that model, pick one. The best model was what's going on at Newark Airport, so we knew what was coming to Kennedy after that, really. And we do the best we can with the snow, with the forecast, and then you bring in the size of staff you need for the amount of equipment you project to use for the snow removal operation. And the operations people, that's my folks, they tell us what we're going to do and the order in which the runways are going to be dealt with. And let me see if I can give you an example with the layout map. Okay. So we have 4 runways, and let me see if I can get that enlarged fully. Okay. So most snow removal starts nor'easters, which we had the first storm, and we would be on these runways, and there were 4 right and 4 left. And that, if you think about a compass, that's 40 degrees to the north. And the reciprocal, which is 180 degrees, is 220 degrees to the southwest. And it's the same thing on the other 2 runways. So one runway's 8,400 feet. That was the primary landing runway. And the other runway was a departure runway. And you'd start with those, and you would leave the other runways, which are northeast and southwest, also, you'd leave them because the wind was going to come around and shift to the northwest. So, particularly when we didn't have enough equipment to handle that, um, we, we really got killed one year. The ops and maintenance people on the site were always complaining about not having another equipment. And we had a bad snowstorm, and the airlines really gave it to us. And guess what? The next year we had another $1 million worth of snow equipment as we talk about crisis management, right? So then, then you would go to the other way and clean those. When with the new equipment, uh, you you knew that much more closely and could communicate. We had the FAA, the airlines, the hangar people, the concessionaires, and we all had to talk to each other. And it got particularly uh, complicated when you got into de-icing, because with de-icing, you had to, at Kennedy, you de-iced at the terminals. We tried de-icing on a taxiway one winter, and it just didn't work. The logistics didn't work. So we actually do and we looked at places all over the airport that were closer to the runway, because the de-icing material, ethylene glycol or polypropylene glycol, um, one comes off easier than the other. So you'd put the first one on, and then you'd put the thicker one on because it would last longer while you're taxiing out to the runway. And the airlines have to be very, very careful. There was a very famous accident in Washington, U.S. air flight, and after that, it really became very, very tough on the de-icing situation. It's much, much, much better now with the other uh, fluids that they're using and the timing that they have. So that's done. And a number of large airports have central de-icing units, and those units, every airplane goes to those units, and everybody is on the computer and knows exactly when every airline is leaving, when it's going to get to the de-icing pad, and when it's going to be told to take off in the system. And all the parties are on, and it's relatively new that all of them are on the same system working together, and it's made a really big difference in terms of how things get done when it comes to de-icing. So, any questions about that? Oh, one other thing about when they talk about brining the roads around the facility, uh, we got to use potassium acetate, which was supposed to be more effective down to lower temperature. But um, it's good until it isn't. It isn't good, and but ice of that magnitude, like we had here, is very rare at Kennedy Airport. We get wet snow, and we get the light snow that we had this week. But the other kind, we don't really have too much of a problem there. But you still have to time when you're going to run down the runways and put the stuff on the runways while you're operating. And sometimes a 747 will land, and it's part of its engine, its outboard engine, is 5 feet from the edge lights. And when you clear, you're supposed to clear up to the edge light, and you do that, and it still compresses the snow. And sometimes when they go into reverse, they pick up chunks of ice, and then we have happy time in the courts talking about whose fault was it. We did everything by the book, and they said, well, was the aircraft on the center line when it landed? And I don't think anybody can determine that. So I was in court a few times. Anyway, what I really wanted to get into after snow is what does it mean to be in operations at a large airport. And for example, we had a number of, we're still under the FAA regulation, and it's still from day to day to day, you still had to maintain the airport in a safe condition. You had to inspect all the safety areas, all the paved areas, looking at markings, signs, and lighting. And you had snow and ice control you had to concern yourself with, emergency planning and response. We had a self-inspection program, which the FAA came out every year and checked. We trained airside vehicles by training trainers at each of the companies that had people driving on the air side of the airport. Because as I used to tell my class of new people, when you go out and drive people around on the air side of the airport and you interact with airplanes, the plane always wins. And I don't think I could make that any stronger than that. And yet, stuff still happens. We had an incident after a snowstorm where one of our most experienced maintenance supervisors drove down runway 4 left, which was closed, and the plane 747 was taking off this way, and he went out beyond onto the runway. He couldn't tell you after the accident. The station wagon rolled over a number of times. One of the people in the back seat was injured pretty severely. But this is the most experienced person you could imagine that he did something like that. And you know what it can do. I mean, I can give you a little hint. Let's take a look at this.
Of the many unique hazards that exist near an aircraft, perhaps there is none more dangerous than that of a jet engine. The danger exists on both ends. It sucks up what's in its path and blows away anything behind it. If it's powerful enough to throw a 435-ton airplane into the sky, imagine what it could do to you or anything else near it. Some don't realize its power. Many don't think it can hurt them. This stage demonstration will show you what it can do, and a picture is worth 1,000 words.
That's what happened to my supervisor in the station wagon, got behind a big jet like that. So you understand what we're talking about. So the other things of concern, nav aids protection for the FAA, wildlife procedures, construction marking and supervisors on, and aircraft recovery, gate management, noise monitoring, media interaction, and aircraft recovery. All those came up over a period of the time I was at Kennedy. And if I could find my list somewhere, I would give you a fuller description of that. But that's, and I know that time is going to be difficult, but I did want to get to one more major factor here. Let's see if I can start. I think I'm going to show two videos if I can find them. Okay. All right. This is because everybody is aware of this. We can talk a little bit about wildlife management because that was a seven-year project that I was involved in. But this is very clearly this is the miracle on the Hudson River. If I can. Yes, thank you. All right, this is LaGuardia Airport. This is US Air 1549. It's taking off to the north to make a left turn over the George Washington Bridge and on its way across the Hudson River. You see it there. This simulation is really very, very accurate. He was at about 1,000 feet when he hit the geese. This includes some of the talk between him and the control tower.
Go up to 528, you can exit Sierra, ground point 7.
0.7528.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, cliff takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear.
49. Eagle 4718, LaGuardia, runway 4, position, hold traffic to land 31.
Position runway 4, Eagle flight 4718.
Piedmont 4203, clear to land 31, wind 36012, traffic to hold on 4.
Clear to land 31, Piedmont 4203.
Cactus 1549, contact near departure, good day.
Good day. Cactus 1549, 700, climbing 5,000.
Cactus 1549, near departure to contact, climb, maintain 15,000.
Maintain 15,000, Cactus 1549.
Little did he know.
Every day.
Here, Johnny 2760 is 5,000, turning in your right to 150.
Johnny 2760, climb, maintain 10,000.
10,000, Johnny 2760.
Here's the strike.
Cactus 15.9, turn left heading 270.
This is Cactus 1539. Hit birds. We've lost thrust on both engines. Returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Tower, stop your departures. Got emergency returning. So it's 1529. He bird strike. He lost all engine. He lost the thrust in the engines. He's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529. If we can get it for you, do you want to try to land 1313?
We're unable. We may end up in the Hudson.
Joey 2760, turn left 070.
070, join 2760.
Hi, Cactus 15.9. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Cactus 15.9. Runway 4 is available if you want to make left traffic to runway 4.
I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's over to our right? Anything in New Jersey, maybe Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off your right side is Teterboro Airport.
See Teterboro up in the...
Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire, actually, LaGuardia departure guy, emergency inbound.
Hey, guys.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge, wants to go to the airport right now.
Wants to go to our airport. Check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? All right. Kelly 2760, contact New York 126.8.
268, join 2760.
Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles.
I mean, they don't know in the LaGuardia control tower what's
4718, turn left
going
heading
on
210.
here, other than what he's telling them.
4718. I think he said he was going in the Hudson.
Cactus 1529, Houston. Cactus 1529, if you can, you got runway 29 available at Newark up at 2 o'clock in 7 miles. You can fly 4718, climb maintain 2000.
Okay, 1000 and even 5 at 280.
And you can
And
fly
that's the
4718,
miracle.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Say again?
Nobody killed.
And we're up to 12,000, 280 on it.
Okay, thank you. You can fly 4718, turn left 2.
Okay, I would like to do two more things. I don't have to leave. Anybody, wants to stay for any further? I have a couple of other things because I knew I wasn't going to be able to cover everything. I would do two more things. One, just give you a little summary of some of the major events that in 35 years, it did not happen every day, so don't be afraid to go out to this airport. I had 2 papal arrivals. The first one, I was an administrative assistant, and I spent the time when the Pope was coming in making box lunches for the police. That was my role at the time. 2 blackouts in New York City in 65 and 74. 5 3-day storms. So whatever you've seen on here and with our experience here, that's a whole different product. 1 kidnapping. Does anybody remember the Bronfman kidnapping in New York where the son it was a hoax, right? Well, we tracked that, not me, I was there at the time. We were tracking that pickup at the station wagon with a ransom. And we're going to follow it, and the police were going to arrest the guy. He gets close to the outside of the airport, and a policeman stops him for speeding. and they're on the road. Let him go. That's one of them. only one Middle East crisis, and that was interesting because I had to call some colonel in Memphis because we did not allow airplanes with soldiers with weapons to come to a gate while it was going through JFK overseas. So they were cooperative and they backed the plane off. But that was interesting speaking with the colonel. 12 airplane excursions. That's the euphemism for a crash, Shelley. 12 of them, okay? Project manager for the new control tower, it moved. Numerous emergency exercises, and there's stories galore about what happens in emergency exercises, especially when Mayor Koch comes out with his contingency and decides to look at all of the triage victims of the of the emergency lying around on the taxiway around the airplane. Yes. UN openings for up to 150 heads of states, and each one is a story unto itself. And we had Castro come in, and we had to send him to a remote location. That's the one where he came to the UN with his pistol on his, if you remember back to then. We had Gorbachev come in, and I was set up by the State Department because I used to deal with somebody in New York from the State Department who coordinated all of these heads of states coming into the airport. So I go to this meeting, and there's three guys about this wide in brown suits, if you can picture it, okay? There was no question that they were A, Russian, and B, you know where they worked. And we got to the point of all the Russian aircraft that came in on Aeroflot had to go to Cuba. That was the deal. That was my understanding. And they said, you keep it here. And I said, no, I can't keep it here. So we caucused. And sure enough, because they said Jimmy Carter's airplane in Moscow was kept at the airport. And we got back to them, and sure enough, they caved, and he had his airplane at the airport. And fortunately for him, that was the Armenian earthquake, and he zipped out to the airport and took off and went back. But I was definitely set up that day. I had a 200-year storm on the busiest weekend of the year, where we're using that snow equipment to blow 6 feet of water from the entrance to the airport with vehicles floating in. You couldn't get in, you couldn't get out. We closed for 9.5 hours, and the police superintendent and I went up in the helicopter to see what we could do about it. And one of my supervisors came up with a route to go across the closed taxiway system onto a service road and pull the traffic out. And by blowing the water up onto the surface, we were able to open the roadway up and put that. So that became part of the manual if we had a storm like that again. And that numerous animal stories, 5 airline bankruptcies, the unofficial burial, started the first airport bird shooting program in 1991. And I got letters from schools, dear murderer, dear slaughterer, okay? And it was, but my organization backed us up. And the first year, we did the shooting program for laughing gulls, and we shot almost 15,000 birds because they had found a place in on the extension of runway 4 left. No predators, and that's where they did their breeding. And the Park Service, that was Park Service land, and they were not happy about that because our missions were very different. So we got permission to do that, and agriculture people got shotguns, and they'd come out during breeding season along the edge of the runway, and they, as the birds were trying to cross the runway to get food for their hatchlings, uh, they would line up and shoot them. Front page of the Daily News, and it was quite an experience, but my organization backed us, and it really, really became an effective way of doing it. The other thing we did, which was a first, we hired a wildlife biologist full time. And as of 2 years ago, 150 airports, both civilian and military, have wildlife biologists either on their staff or by contract, looking at the same thing. It's a problem, and I have just one thing here. I have a lot more than that, but as of from 1990 to 2024, wildlife strikes reported in the U.S. 313,716. So it's still a problem, and airports still have to deal with it, and they have different species and different characteristics, and shooting has become allowed. The second year, the state Fish and Wildlife were unhappy with the fact that the headlines were that we shot so many laughing gulls and blackback and ring-billed gulls. And we went up to Albany, and they were not going to sign off on the program the second year. So my boss and I left, and we talked, and we came back and we said, okay, thank you very much for your attention. But the only thing we would like to tell you was if we have a crash next year, it's on you. Where do I sign? And it's continued. It's still continuing the program. They have a wonderful biologist on staff at Kennedy who I know. And I think what I'd like to do, and if you want me to continue, I'm happy to do so. Okay? So I can. That program took 7 years till we were allowed to start the shooting program. Okay? And we were doing all kinds of things. And it started with a strike in 1975 of a DC-10. Sorry. So this is what happened. The FAA turned a blind eye on what was going on with birds and airplanes, and they said, well, no, it's not this, it's not that. And it turned out, that's bird strikes. The Sullivan crash into the Hudson was one of a 4-species goose population, and they were able to trace that as a migrating geese from Nova Scotia that were in the area. And geese are a real problem because of their size, obviously. So this was the crash in 75. This was in 79. There were 15 laughing gull nests and 2 strikes. In 1990, 7,600 and 135 strikes. So strike would be if we found the gulls on the side of the runway or the taxiway, knowing that they hadn't committed suicide. So we would keep statistics, which was very important because the Park Service was absolutely against us doing anything because Jamaica Bay is part of the National Park System, and that's their mission, is to do the best they can to clean up Jamaica Bay to attract the birds. And, you know, it just doesn't work from our mission. And as I said, we ended up actually, it took 7 years and 3 studies, and we finally got them to buy in that. And then, of course, they're the ones that called the Daily News to make sure they had pictures when we started the program. So we had a lot of different things that we tried. We tried owl. We tried putting an owl model in amongst the birds. We tried. We had propane cannons. Well, before the propane cannon went off along the side of the runway, it would click. I guess bird went off the cannon. It blew, and it came back down on the cannon. They got used to it, and they really do get used to things, and that's why the shooting program really, as a last resort, I mean, we didn't really start out with that. That's what we did. And so that's in brief the wildlife program, and of course, I'm proud that we were the first ones that were able to do that and maintain the safety on the airport, because that's what it's all about. That job is to see that that airport is safe for the planes to take off and land. And the other thing we did, and I'll just, again, do it quickly, if you don't mind, I have an actual overrun into the material that project took 12 years to get material that would stop airplanes that overran runways. Okay, let's try that, and then we'll. That's the material called engineered material systems.
Air travel has never been safer than it is today. But this sense of security is jeopardized by runway excursions, including overruns and veer-offs, which occur more often than we tend to acknowledge. The Flight Safety Foundation analyzed worldwide aviation data from 1995 to 2008. The statistics revealed that runway excursions occur at a rate of 2 to 3 times a month, are responsible for 97% of all runway accidents, and 30% of all aircraft accidents. But the most eye-opening statistic was runway safety-related accidents where excursions occur account for 83% of all fatal runway accidents. Key West International Airport, Florida, October 31, 2011. A Gulfstream 150 business jet overran the runway on the west end of runway 27. The aircraft passed through a 600-foot runway safety area, plus 220 additional feet, before stopping in a small pond 3 feet short of a fence. Fuel leakage occurred with substantial damage to the aircraft. 2 passengers suffered minor injuries. The NTSB and FAA were still on site November 3rd when the unthinkable happened. A Cessna Citation 550 approached the east end, or departure end of runway 09 during landing rollout at a high rate of speed and was unable to stop. But this end of the runway had a Zodiac Arresting Systems EMOS MAX installation in place. The result was dramatically different. The aircraft passed over a 35-foot setback area, then engaged the EMOS MAX system and came to a safe, controlled stop. The 5 people on board quickly exited the aircraft with no injuries. The aircraft suffered only minimal damage with no fuel leakage. By 2 p.m., the aircraft had been towed to a hangar and the runway reopened at 2:06 p.m.
Yet
will stop an aircraft. It will stop it quickly, it'll stop it safely with very little, if any, damage to the aircraft and very little, if any, injury to the occupants. I mean, those people got out of that citation, all of them exited that citation literally before the dust settled.
Actually, it was very smooth but steady, aggressive stop, but not, not forceful. Just a real de-acceleration without any real abrupt stoppage.
One measure for mitigating runway excursions is the build-out of safety areas. In the U.S., a federal mandate requires all deficient RSAs to be brought into compliance with FAA standards by December 31st, 2015. This can be satisfied in two ways: a 1,000-foot-long RSA beyond the runway end, or an EMAS, Engineered Material Arresting System, providing a comparable level of safety. Per FAA guidance, an EMAS can reduce the RSA space to 600 feet or less. Other challenges are space-constrained runway ends, and environmental issues. The economical footprint of an EMAS can be the perfect solution in these cases. San Luis Obispo Airport was the first airport to use an EMAS to acquire a sizable runway extension within their existing airport property. By physically shifting their runway north and installing two approximately 300-foot-long arrestor beds at both ends of runway 1129, the airport gained 800 feet of runway length, 400 feet at each end. A low-strength EMAS is available as an option for general aviation airports with a lighter-weight aircraft mix. Zodiac Arresting Systems has been safely stopping military aircraft and protecting high-value assets for over 60 years. That expertise proved invaluable when Zodiac Arresting Systems, at that time known as ESCO, partnered with the FAA, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and the academic community.
That plane that went in and lost its front wheel was the last test before we were going ahead with the contract to put it on runway 4 right. Because when I first went there, the first meeting I went to was a plane had gone into the ditch at the end of that runway. So we went through a whole series of things. We looked at polyfoam that's the cups are made of. We looked at other materials, and this was the material that I have those pieces there you can touch. They're covered with, a paint or whatever the material is that they cover them with after they put it in. But the nose wheel went off when they went into the material down at the FAA Center. And we said, oh my God, this is terrible. The press was there. This was going to be the last. So we went to the meeting, and one of the guys said, you know what? So what? It worked. He said, this is exactly what we wanted to do. If that happened with an actual aircraft and all that happened was the nose wheel collapsed, it ended up in the material and safe. And it turned out, this was an old 727, turned out that it was a flaw in the airplane itself. So we went ahead. So this material is now at 116 runway ends. 25 aircraft have been stopped over the years with many hundreds of people on board. And the first 3 overruns were at my wonderful airport. And they worked, and all up to including a DC-10. So I wanted to share that with you because that's one of the real great things that I think happened that's at work today. So I thank you for your attendance. And I was in Calgary on 9/11 I had I had gone into consulting, and I was at a snow conference on that day. But of course, I had some people with me who couldn't get back, and new people, new people in the Trade Center because that's our headquarters was there. So
The desk.